Senator Bernie Sanders on Wednesday criticized Israeli forces for cutting off electricity, food, fuel, and water to the more than 2 million residents of Gaza, calling it a serious violation of international law that will cause hundreds of thousands of children to suffer. The targeting of civilians is a war crime, no matter who does it. Israel's blanket denial of food, water, and other necessities to Gaza is a serious violation of international law and will do nothing but harm innocent civilians, said Sanders, leading progressive voice in Congress and a former presidential candidate in a statement. Sanders praised the United States for rightfully offering support to Israel in responding to the attacks by Hamas militants that have killed more than 1,000 people in Israel, but he insisted Israeli defense forces should not retaliate against civilians in Gaza. We must also insist on restraint from Israeli forces attacking Gaza and work to secure UN humanitarian access. Let us not forget that half of the 2 million people in Gaza are children. Children, innocent people, do not deserve to be punished for the acts of Hamas, he said. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant on Monday ordered a complete siege on Gaza and said such severe tactics are justified against human animals. Jeez. We are fighting against human animals and we act accordingly. There will be no electricity, no food, no water, no fuel. Militants from Hamas, the political group that controls Gaza and is recognized as a terrorist group by the United States, attacked Israel on Saturday. Video of killings of civilians have widely circulated, and Hamas has taken hostages after the incursion. Israeli defense forces have pummeled Gaza since the weekend with airstrikes on buildings and critical infrastructure. Palestinian health authorities are warning that hospitals will run out of fuel by Thursday. And the group Doctors Without Borders says hospitals are already overwhelmed with the huge influx of wounded civilians. More than 1,000 people in Gaza have died. Sanders condemned Hamas's brutal surprise attacks on Israeli civilians who were murdered at a musical festival while driving on the roads, waiting at a bus stop, or while enjoying a typical Saturday morning at home as horrific. The gunning down of young Israelis at a music festival is an image the world will not soon forget, he said. But he warned that weekend's attacks will embolden extremists on both sides continue the cycle of violence. He urged the United States and its allies to pressure Israel to minimize civilian casualties in any military invasion of Gaza. Right now, the international community must focus on reducing humanitarian suffering and protecting innocent people on both sides of the conflict. He called the attack by Hamas a major setback for any hope of peace and reconciliation in the region and justice for the Palestinian people. And he said the attacks will make it only more difficult to improve the conditions of the residents of Gaza. For many, it is no secret that Gaza has been an open-air prison with millions of people struggling to secure basic necessities. He said Hamas's terrorism will make it more difficult to address that tragic reality. Well, I have to say, there's not much about his statement I really disagree with. I guess I could bring up the whole Code Pink thing where he had these people from that group that came to his office about this, and they sort of just kind of, or rather came to his office about this other matter, and that a lot of people saying that he was now pro-war. God, I can't believe that wasn't even 2 weeks ago. So this response is, I always wanted Sanders, as someone who was Jewish, I felt he would be able to be critical of the Israeli government without facing the same slanders that the rest of us do when we talk about the way they've treated Palestinians. So his response, again, I'm fine with it, but it's not as forceful as I would have preferred. I'll put it that way. But no, he's right. Israel committed a war crime. Denying basic necessities is a serious violation of international law. And you have people like Nikki Haley, everyone's favorite neocon, who talks about the UN is so anti-Israel. No, they're anti-apartheid states that deprive people of basic goods. Obviously, they're upset over the 1,000 people that were killed. But when you start messing with hospitals, you're not targeting terrorists. You're targeting regular civilians that live there, who you basically want to stick it in the eye of okay, you can take out some of us, we can do the exact same thing right back. It kind of reminds me a little bit of, on a much smaller scale, of what happened in Yemen with Saudi Arabia, where they were bombing hospitals and grocery stores after their best friend government got toppled by the Houthi rebels. It's that same belief system of you did something that we don't like or that upset us greatly, so we're going to now start denying you very basic things needed to survive. These people. I I think it is a major setback for any hope of peace and reconciliation, but again, if you look at this from the perspective of the Hamas, they probably didn't think they were going to get that anyway. It's like year after year, you get put down by the other side who's got more power than you, who gets cheerleaded by American politicians because it's the only democracy in the Middle East, so it has to be better automatically than everywhere else. And at one point, they just said, okay, well, to hell with it. And of course, I don't agree with killing 1,000 people or anyone, but it's just this incident was caused by years of neglect, years of these partisan regions like America siding with Israel no matter what. And they just said, well, we're going to strike out. And it's not something that, I certainly have any stomach for, but it is a thing that I think requires a broader understanding and context. And that's why I said Sanders' response is better on this than someone like, Tim Scott or Nikki Haley, where there's a condemnation of what happened, right? No one is saying what Hamas did was good. No one is saying that 1,000 people should have been, none of that. But there's also the positioning of, okay, you have to understand that this is not just random evil people showed up and did something. This is after years and years of one side getting everything and the other one getting nothing except scorn and being treated like second-class citizens. So for them, there is no sign of peace. It's been decades of this, and I'm glad that Sanders at least tries to acknowledge that it's not just this one-side conflict. It's so funny how if we lived in a true society where people actually thought before they rushed to the Israeli government's defense, they would say, hey, you know what? Uh, okay, I get where you want to strike back against those that attacked you. I mean, we claim to be doing the same thing after 9/11, but going after hospitals probably is not the way to do it. But no one cares. They just want to sit there and praise this other country's government and smear anyone that critiques it in the slightest way as being against Jewish people, even though none of us have criticized Jews whatsoever. And we're probably going to see more of this in the coming years, unfortunately.